Hi, it's Miracle Monday again. Today we're going to find out what happens next in the true story of Joseph. We find this story in the book of Genesis, which is the first book of the Bible. And remember last week we learned that Joseph was his father's favorite son, even though he had 11 other brothers. His brothers were so jealous that they decided to kill him, but changed their minds at the last minute and sold him as a slave instead. We learned about how even though Joseph was in a really bad situation, the Lord was still with him. His master, Potiphar, liked Joseph and put him in charge of everything he had. Joseph was successful and had everything he needed and more because God was with him. We're going to pick up where we left off in the story of Joseph because a lot more happens to him. We're going to see God's work in Joseph's life. And I'm going to read from Genesis 39, 6 through 23, but I'm going to paraphrase some of the parts. That means I'm not going to read the exact words from the Bible, but I'm going to use words that are easier for kids to understand. So here we go. Now Joseph was well-built and handsome. After some time, the wife of Joseph's master, that's Potiphar, had a crush on Joseph. One day she said to him, "Let's go kiss and hug." Now remember, boys and girls, when a man and a woman are married, they aren't supposed to have kissy, huggy boyfriends or girlfriends. That's God's rule, and Joseph knew it. Potiphar's wife wanted to do something that Joseph knew was wrong. But Joseph refused. He said to her, "My master trusts me with everything in his house. He has put me in charge of everything he owns. There is no one in the house greater than I. He has not kept anything from me except you. And that is because you are his wife. How could I do such an evil thing? It's a sin against God." The woman talked to Joseph every day, but he refused to kiss and hug her. He didn't even want to spend time with her. One day, Joseph went into the house to do his work as usual. He was the only man at the house at that time, and his master's wife grabbed his coat. She said to him, "Let's go kiss and hug." But Joseph left his coat in her hand and ran out of the house. Guys, he got out of there as fast as he could. She saw what Joseph had done. He had left his coat in her hands and had run outside. So she called to the servants in her house, and she said, "Look! This Hebrew slave has brought here to shame me. He came in and tried to kiss and hug me. And then I screamed. My scream scared him, and he ran away. But he left his coat with me." Was she telling the truth? I don't think so. The story goes on. She kept his coat until her husband came home. And she told her husband the same story. She said, "This Hebrew slave you brought here came in to kiss and hug me. When he came near me, I screamed. He ran away, but he left his coat." When Joseph's master, Potiphar, heard this, he became very angry. He was so angry that he had Joseph arrested and put him into prison. That's jail. This prison was where the king's prisoners were put, and Joseph had to stay there in prison. So here again, we find that Joseph is in a really bad situation, and he didn't do anything wrong. First, his brothers threw him in a well and sold him as a slave. Then, after he became important in Potiphar's house, Potiphar's wife tried to kiss and hug him, and when he said no, because he knew it was wrong, she told a terrible lie about him. Now, he was in prison and must have felt very sad and very lonely and like it was really unfair. But here's what the Bible says happened next. The Bible says, "But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him kindness. The Lord caused the prison warden," that's the person in charge of the jail, "to be like Joseph." I'm sorry, not to be like Joseph, but to like Joseph. The prison warden chose Joseph to take care of all the prisoners. He was responsible for whatever was done in the prison. The warden paid no attention to anything that was in Joseph's care because he didn't need to worry about it. This was because the Lord was with Joseph. The Lord made Joseph successful in everything he did. God is so good. First, when Joseph was sold as a slave, he was made the manager of his master's house. Then, when he was falsely accused, that means Potiphar's wife said he did something that he didn't do, he was thrown in prison. But before long, God took that situation and made it good. He was the second in command in the prison, just like he was the second in command for Potiphar. Sometimes it's hard for us to see what good could possibly come out of a bad situation. But God is more powerful and more wonderful than we can even imagine. And it's important for us to remember that God kept working things out for Joseph's good because Joseph was faithful. Those of you who were with us in Kids Church yesterday will remember that faithfulness is one of the fruits of the Spirit. Remember, we did this for faithfulness? Because to be faithful means being loyal, trustworthy, and reliable. Joseph followed God's ways, even when somebody, Potiphar's wife, wanted him to sin. He didn't stop following God just because somebody else wanted him to. When we follow God's ways, even when it's hard or someone wants us to do something wrong, He will bless us and work even a bad situation to His good. When you're tempted to do something wrong, remember Joseph. Joseph was faithful and followed God's rules, and when things went wrong, God stuck with him and made things better. Joseph's story isn't over yet. Check back next week when we find out how God works His wonders in Joseph's life again. Have a great day. Bye-bye.